Lovely. So start just by sitting comfortably, not too fussy to begin with about posture. That's something that is refined. It's an ongoing thing. But you want to feel that you're supported, and you notice I'm sitting forwards on the chair. It means that my legs are able to engage. But that can be quite stiff on the back. So don't force yourself into a position. And start just rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Your arm. Other side. Part of your chest. It's of course a good way to physically warm up, but also to help this important aspect of bringing your attention into your body. Finishing with your legs. Okay. So sitting back, and one of the things that we want to try and achieve with the postures that we take, whether seated or standing, upright or whatever, is to allow gravity to pull us into our support. And in this case, of course, principally that's going to be the chair. This means finding a way of being in the chair where we feel comfortable and confident that when we release some of the tightness, some of the resistance to gravity, that we're still going to be able to be here. We're not going to, the chair's not going to collapse. We're not going to fall out of the chair. So we have to think about structure. We have to think about, are we aligned in the chair? And this leads us to this sense of our weight beginning to drain downwards, rooting down. And maybe noticing as we do that, as we sort of relieve, if you like, the chest, the burden of carrying the weight, we to get away from the need to tighten up in our bellies. All sorts of interesting changes can begin to take place in our bodies. We notice a change in our breathing, our sense of circulation, all sorts of different things that we can just begin to observe, to take note of. So gradually our attention sinks more deeply into the body. We're more aware of what's going on within ourselves, in that inner landscape of the body. Giving us a greater sense of awareness of how we might change things if we need to, how we might move with this. And also because our attention is occupied with this, a sense of just settling in our thoughts, just allowing those sort of extraneous thoughts to slip into the background during the practice. So now we come to the upright stance again, and we go through the same process again. Noting how we're supported, and ideally, if you can be, for a while at least, forwards in the chair, tilting forward so you feel about a third of your weight in your feet. So you're supported by your legs, supported by the chair, the front of your body is supported by your back. And a feeling that your weight is focused somewhat, just a little bit forwards, not right back on the edge. As I said earlier, if you find this is starting to make your back ache, then you can sit back. You won't get the same awareness of what's happening in your feet and your legs, but rather that than straining in your back. Front of your body dropping down a little bit, your shoulders dropping down, and just be aware that when we're able to release some of that tightness, we do get a sense of releasing, but often we kind of tighten up again very quickly. And one of the things that can help us to overcome that is just to recognize that when, say, for instance, our shoulders drop, we still have a shape, we still have a support, we're supported from within by our skeleton. And so gradually a sense of confidence returns to us and our body's ability to actually support itself. And anything that you noted in the reclining position may surface in this. Maybe you breathe in your circulation. But a certain amount of space beginning to develop in your body with the release of that tightness. Our intention will be to, when we move, to let that movement fill up that space, but not to strain against its edges. And then turning your head gently. Just noting when you're approaching that point where there's some kind of resistance, some kind of barrier to the movement, stopping just before you get there. And come to your shoulders, hands in front of your shoulders, elbows circling back. I say shoulders, but actually, if you pay attention, you'll notice movement in your chest and your upper back and your sides as you do this. And then going forwards. And down to your sides. So these are very simple movements. And of course, they're joint rotations, and that's always a useful thing. But again, they can serve as focal points for our attention. We can begin to notice there's connections in our body. What other parts of the body engage as we simply rotate our arms? Again, it might be chest, upper back, so on. And then winding around. And back the other way. Now, tilting your pelvis forward, so leaning forwards a little bit more of your weight goes into your legs. Push back by pushing your feet into the ground, letting your hips drop back. So when we move in the center of this body, of our body, the pelvis, waist, that kind of area, we can begin to feel that sense of other parts of the body connecting to the movement through the whole of the body. It's no longer just a few muscles in the chest or something like that. When we tilt forwards, our weight goes forwards, and we feel that in our legs and our feet. Our shoulders go forwards, we feel that in our shoulders, our back, our chest, and so on. So we're just building up a picture of what we might think of as the inner landscape of the body, a map perhaps. Where are the pathways of movement? Where are the best places to take that movement and so on? So this is like, if you imagine you had a ball here in your belly, this is a vertical rotation forwards and backwards. And coming back and actually turn horizontally, turn towards one leg, and then do the same thing again. This time, when you arrive forwards, give yourself a moment to just register the difference between this leg where the weight is and the other leg, between what we would call in Tai Chi full and empty. And this is something that becomes a bit more significant perhaps when we're standing. In the direction. And then by turning in your center, drawing your head around in a smooth circle, your weight traveling between feet and hips. Change direction. And back to the center. Now, one foot, step out, heel down, lower the toes, gently press the foot into the floor, plant in the foot. Change sides. More time. Now, go back to this movement, just rocking forwards and backwards. Before we bring the arms into the movement, just notice what's happening in your feet and your hips. We call the transition of the weight a transition from full to empty. The part of the body, the feet or the hips that have the majority of the weight is full. And in particular, when you go forwards, notice what's happening in your legs. It's quite possible that if you say you have a problem with the knee, that when you go forwards, you quite automatically tighten up around that knee. The problem with that is that it stops the weight going any further. So effectively, your knee starts to carry the weight of the body. What we want to try and do is as we go forwards, the first place we feel the pressure of the weight, ideally would be the soles of our feet, and then a sense of that weight filling up through the rest of your leg. That may help you just to get a feeling of releasing in the knee, which at first is counterintuitive. We feel as though we want to protect it, but actually it means that it's no longer weight bearing, but that it has got that sense of movement, of energy flowing through it. Now, when we come to the standing, I'll remind you of this, because the problem is that when we stand, there's much more of the weight going into the leg. We're much less in control. So you're far more likely to build up that resistance, which in the long run we don't find useful. So I'm drawing your attention to it now so that you have an idea of what you're looking to be able to build in standing exercises. Once you've begun to understand the method, to feel the method, you'll find it comes more easily either seated or standing. But for now, keeping that going, but sit back in your hips, turn your hands out, down, hanging below your shoulders. Bird folds its wings. This time from the forward position, keep your hands facing back and following through, going forwards, your arms mostly staying behind your shoulders until you settle into your feet, then they swing through. And when you settle back in your hips, only then do they swing through. So your arm just swinging in a nice gentle curve. As I say, most of the time it's behind your shoulders slightly, not too far. So just sort of countering the habit, the urge to lead with our arms. Next time, when you come back, leave your arms out in front and feel how they're pulled up slightly. Imagine the ball there that you're rolling in towards your chest. And then this time, following through, as your arms come up, turn them palm in and draw your elbows apart. Feel again how your chest opens up a little bit and then contracts. Pigeon spreads its wings. So having started that process, or that, if you want to call it that, method perhaps, of being aware of what's going on within your body, the connections and the resonances, the pathways of the movement. Just realizing that there's a lot of common ground between all of the exercises, a steady rhythm of expansion and contraction and other elements, a quality of movement. There are also differences between each exercises. They all work on the body in slightly different ways. Again, if we think of it being an inner landscape, the landscape is one cohesive whole, but there are different pathways running through it. Then, this time, as you come back, leaving your hands in line with your hips, your elbows go out a little bit and pressing forwards. Again, the arms gently swing up, pushing wave. A more compact economic movement than the previous one. how to be stronger and fear as well. Don't think in terms of lifting your arm. If I bring my hand to this position, my arm to this position, the movement forward pushes the elbow forwards. No, my arm naturally swings up. So I haven't got to lift up. I just let the curve occur quite naturally. So that awareness of patterns of movement, characteristics within the body isn't restricted to just observation. That's an important part of it. But we can begin to be a bit discriminating. We can bring intention into this and begin to notice what you might refer to as the most economic way of doing a movement, one that causes least strain on the body, that follows the path of least resistance. More time. Come back and fist in your hands, rolling them into a hollow fist, in forwards and rotating until at most they're palm down, front, at most palm up. Just go back. But you might find that, you know, if you're stiff in your shoulders, for instance, the, the, the rotation is a lot smaller than that. So again, nothing should be forced. Now, here, open your fingers again, turn them out slightly, winding out and back as you bring your weight back. Turning your hands palm down, turn in one direction, hips drop back, but your pelvis overall tilts forwards, turning to swing across and then back. This is polishing the table. Change direction. So we reach out and then we come back. We find that sort of central position, just settle there, and then move out. It's sometimes in this one, another exercise, it's hard to see how our hips, in particular hips and waist, function. So well, I'm going to stand up with my back to you and show you the standing version of this, so you can see more easily what I'm trying to do with my hips. I turn my body, I push my hips back, and it's that which sends my head and shoulders forwards. I swing across, I let my hips drop down again, that brings me upright, and I turn to the front. Then I go in the other direction, turning, hips going back, swinging around, and it's the hips dropping down that help to bring my head to the upright. The hips dropping down creates an upward energy in my upper body. One more on each side. Okay. Let your hands rest. So when we start to use our hips in that way, this thing about when the hips drop down, the head comes up. Three things to note with that. One is that your head does come up. So rather than straining in our shoulders or our neck to pull ourselves up, we learn to drop our hips, and that brings us up much more gently with much more openness. It also helps our weight to drop. And this is important because this is the rooting down, and it's one of the principal things that brings us the stability of the movement. And then when we turn, our arms follow the movement. So in many ways, when we want to make a movement, our starting point is in the center of the body, with a sort of awareness that it's from the center down into the ground, rather than starting with our arms. So there's this readjustment, this change in perspective that begins to take place. So bearing that in mind, that when our hips drop back like this, we did this in the chair earlier, your head will come up. And so that creates an upward energy. And we're going to make use of that. Bring your hands to rest in your lap. Until you've got a ball cradling in your arms. Look for that feeling of releasing. Feel the expansion upwards. Turn your hands over, feel your hips still sinking down and your arms following. This exercise is called rooting down because of that connection that it makes to the ground. You can imagine a bit of a push through your hips and buttocks. That push would be downwards to push your hands up. Then turning your hands so your fingers are pointing away from your shoulders, and with this one, the wild goose. Maybe finding that the image of the bird in flight draws some kind of quality into the movement, smoothness of movement, graceful movement. Time easing forwards. Your hands just sweep in front of your body, sit back and push up, heart in the clouds. Particularly at the bottom here, for a moment, your arms are just hanging down, a very loose feeling in your shoulders. You won't necessarily be able to keep that in as they go up, but at least register that. And this looser quality is an indication that we're beginning to let some of that tension, some of that tightness flow away. A process sometimes referred to in Tai Chi as emptying of the tightness, emptying of the stiffness. Do one more of these. Letting your hands drop down, feeling the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. And then the next feeling of expansion is, again, a gentle push down. Let that push your arm up on one side. Wind around as though you're plucking something off a tree. Pulling down. With your attention to the opposite side. Same thing, pushing up and drawing down. Trying to keep that feeling of tension draining away, of emptying. As always, these things go in pairs. So as we start to empty, we leave a space. And we want to be careful not to let that space be filled up by old habits of movement and tension and so on and so forth. So there's a filling stage. And that's achieved, a great deal of that is achieved through imagery. So if you imagine that you're doing this in water, do one more of these. I'm going to change the exercise. It's probably a better exercise for that particular image. Bring your hands around, push up. Yeah, see, if you imagine you're doing this in water, when we move in water, there are two things to note, this time pushing sideways. One is that we're more likely to release tightness in our body. And the other is, actually, you're still working quite hard. You know, it's quite a strong exercise, this swimming, even though the encouragement is not to stiffen up. We know that if we stiffen up, the resistance of the water gets much stronger. So this helps us to generate a quality that we refer to in Tai Chi as inner strength. I sometimes use the term resilience instead of strength. I think strength is a slightly awkward term here. And this is something that really owes a lot to the martial side of Tai Chi. I think it's significant for all of us. We begin to use more of the body, so we're conditioning parts of the body that often don't get conditioned very well. Skeletal muscle, tendon, ligament, fascia, perhaps. It's possible to condition the fascia, and not just physically condition, but to engage. Also, the movement itself, the flow somehow again becomes a bit more resilient. And that's the sense of the energy getting stronger. One of the principal aims in Chinese medicine being to really encourage this energy to become stronger. Stronger the energy, the better our well-being. Very crude terms, it's a bit simplistic to put it like that. This comes from Chinese medicine. For me, the way I experience that inner change from the emptying stage, the very loose, open, spacious quality, to the more resilient quality, is like it's the difference between feeling a soft breeze on my skin and feeling water flowing over my skin. But you may experience it in a different way. And then this time, as you push out sideways, you turn a little. And remember, if you were doing this in water, it wouldn't just be about your arms turning the other way here. Your shoulder is also pushing into the water in both directions. This is pushing in 4 directions. Remembering to bring your hands back to that starting point each time, quite deliberately, quite intentionally. Returning yourself, particularly your attention, to that central part of the body. And this too is a regular pattern. This time, extend one leg, put the heel down, keep the knee a bit bent. Ease forwards, just scooping the sea and looking at the sky. We extend out, our hips drop back, remember, drawing our shoulders and our head and our arms over. And then it's as though the whole body flows into the center again and then goes forwards. Expanding and contracting, yang to yin. This is the rhythm of all the movements. And that rhythm brings both your arms and your attention back to this area of the center and from there to the ground. Now, roll your hands into a hollow fist. This is grasping the tiger's ears. One more time. Change over. Starting again with scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then this time, as your hands come down, switching to grasping the tiger's ears. And just to reiterate a couple of things that I brought into the movement there. The first is this return to the center, and I think this is one of the very positive outcomes of Tai Chi, that we learn to bring our attention back, not just physically, but our attention and our intention to this central part of the body and down into the ground. And we begin to associate that with a kind of returning to a quieter space, a still space. And so we begin to realize that it's almost like, as I've described it before, so sometimes people might, you might have a favorite space in a park or by the river where you like to go and sit and be quiet for a while, and you know where it is, and you can go there, and you also have the expectation of quietness, so you can sit there and kind of recharge there in a sense. And this can help you do the same thing within that inner landscape. You're working out a pathway just to touch for a brief moment that sense of the stillness. It would be nice to think that we always kept it during the movement, but in reality, we do lose it. So that rhythmic nature, that cyclical nature of the movements really encourages the cultivation of that. The second thing to do with this inner resilience, this inner strength, so something that really comes from the martial side of Tai Chi, and it's considered to be quite advanced. But we might as well start whenever we start doing Tai Chi, thinking about this. And I think in that sense, if we can get away from strength as an image of sort of like bulging muscles and things like that, we realize that is something that is both mentally and physically and energetically is very important to us. If we're, if you've been ill or something like that, then you might feel quite weak. And people who have a long-term condition, that can be a tremendous difficulty to bear, and on all sorts of different levels. As I said, that sense of strengthening, it doesn't have to be about martial arts and fighting. That resilience can help us to continue to move, to even to maybe to sort of resist catching colds and so on and so forth. So making use of an image like moving through water, once we have that focus of attention and we're able to sustain the attention, we begin to be able to sustain the image. And so, this is an important part of this inner cultivation. Now, once again, just rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. And then your belly. And your legs. Okay, and then push your heels up. Get the muscles of your legs working. They're probably stiffened up a bit sitting down. And then circling around. And then back the other way. Okay, and then standing. You wish to remain seated, of course, as always. And if you want to do what I suggest sometimes, that I do sometimes, it's interesting to use the chair for a bit of extra support. Sometimes it's going to help you to work out how best to do something. Just as we worked out in the chair how best to get the weight to go fully into the leg without straining our knees. So, we build these things up slowly. Now, just standing with your feet hip width apart, looking again to find a posture that is in line with whatever supporting is. And of course, the ground is important, but our feet and our legs, and we want to feel that our body's weight flows straight down, so we're not twisted over, holding on to the weight or something like that. Ideally, having your weight forwards a little bit in your feet and just letting your hips settle back as though you're perched on the edge of a table. Let's get some water. So structurally, of course, it's quite different to sitting in the chair. But in terms of the feel of the movement, they're supported by your feet, the front of your body is supported by your back again. And your whole body, once again, you have an awareness of this sense of the skeleton. And that sense of inner resilience that I was describing comes from the center of the body. It's sometimes said in Tai Chi that outside we have the softness of cotton, but inside the strength of steel. And so the way that I think of it is, if you get a balloon, you blow the balloon up, and then you push your finger into the balloon, you meet stronger and stronger resistance. The first couple of millimeters, hardly anything at all. The deeper in you go, the more resistance you meet. But it's never hard. It's never going to be like poking your finger into a wall. So it's a denser might be another way of describing this. And part of what we're trying to do is to cultivate that density, that resilience, not just deep in the body, but really through the whole body. So as though you're moving through water, let your hips drop back down, bring hands around, just as we did in the chair. A lot more aware now of how your legs are functioning and the significance of this dropping down of the center of your gravity. The lower your center of gravity, the deeper your root, the more stable you are. Like a tree that puts down deep roots is less likely to be blown by the wind. And then change into the wild goose. One more time. And then part in the clouds. One more time. Lovely. Shake out. So now put one foot forwards. Once again, if you do have, say, a bit of arthritis in the knee or an ankle, you don't want to put pressure on that. That's going to make it worse. But it's good to move it to get the sense of movement through, to get the sense of the energy flowing through. Again, this movement of energy is one of the things that we look to cultivate in Chinese medicine. That's the state of the energy is very strongly related to our state of well-being on all sorts of levels. So if, say, my front knee's a bit painful here, what I want to try and do is to think about what's happening. I want the weight to drop to the foot, not to the knee, and so on and so forth. And this is where we may refer back to what we did in the chair, where it's really a lot more under control in the chair, but the method is the same. And once we've understood that, we can begin to apply it. Another thing you could do, another way you could help yourself with this, is to have the chair there so that you're not asking the leg to take a lot of weight. Once again, once you've worked out what to do, you can gradually increase that. So we want to be able to improve. We want to be able to improve our weight transfer and our mobility and so on and so forth. But we don't want to we don't want to damage that knee or whatever part of the body it is. So the intention here is to release, to let go of the tightness in that area. And one idea you might work with is that your legs are a bit like a drain pipe. And the drain pipe at the side of your house allows the water to flow down from the roof to the ground. But if there's a blockage in the drain pipe, it's not going to work. So I'm not suggesting that we take a cavalier attitude towards that painful knee or whatever it is, but rather that we can have a creative way of working with it. And this could apply anywhere in the body, really. And when you go back this time, just gently raise your front toes, turn the front foot out a little bit. And going forwards, you push the back knee forwards, and both of these allow slightly stronger, in a way, shift of the weight. And we come closer to a point where our upper body is more directly above the leg, and our head is above the foot. We're more in line over one leg. So again, we're talking about that sense of alignment to the pull of gravity, which I mentioned right back at the beginning when we were in the reclining position. Now, it's a different position, a different structure, but the principle is the same. So we know what to look for, and our intention is to find that again. And it's interesting to note how, with experience, our bodies are very good at that intentionality, at following that instruction. And then stepping in. It's very natural for our bodies to follow and to respond physically to intention of one kind or another, to imagery, to memory, to ideas, and so on and so forth. Shake out. If you've ever, read a book about Arctic explorers and you read it on a summer's day, if it's a good book, you might start to feel chilly. You might shimmer slightly. All sorts of things can do that to us. If you've ever looked at a photograph book and seen a photograph of you with some friends laughing, they're having fun together, you might smile. Both of those are physical responses to imageries, to memories, and so on and so forth. So it's quite natural for us to do this, but it's something that in Tai Chi we actively cultivate. Now, have your other foot forwards. And so we begin to be able to bring about subtle changes within the body, small changes that accumulate into big changes. So when we talk about mind and body coming together, or there's three elements of mind, body, and energy, it's not hierarchical. It's not mind over matter. We're not trying to force our body to do something that is wrong for it to do. It's about this creative interaction of those three elements, and which we focus on at any particular time depends on our circumstances. But we want to try and work with all three of those things, because when they come together, that's when we really have the sort of more advanced, if you like, the deeper sense of the movement. Raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in, trying to get your pelvis level, keeping that feeling of sinking through your supporting foot. You can put the toes on the ground just for that little bit of extra security. So this isn't about sort of having your other leg waving around in the air. Take a few steps through, forwards or backwards, depends where you have the room. Take your time. Trying to retain that awareness of your posture, your alignment, your root. And then going back, changing direction. Okay. Have your right foot forward, so mirror my movements. The back foot, settle down, turn a little bit to the right, let your arms swing out. Go forwards, let the arms drop down, and as you settle in the front foot, turn again, the arms swing out and bring the rear foot in. This is dragonfly skims the water. Step through, planting the foot forwards, and what you may find you're able to do is raise the leg up as well. Don't worry if that's too much for the moment. We're just combining the step in with some of those earlier movements that we were doing. I'm going to change direction now. So this is a way of, apart from being a lovely movement in its own right, this is a way of just allowing a lot of what I've been talking about, those basics, those fundamental principles, again, to take a bit of a back seat. We want to know that they're there, but we don't have to think about them because there's other things going on. It's quite challenging to do that. Change direction again. And again. One more time. Bringing your feet down. Go back to your chair. We want to be able to get to a point where these basic principles, so, an awareness of the body, its alignment with the pull of gravity, your root, that sense of stillness, that sense of resilience, are things that come into our daily lives. But of course, there's plenty of distractions in our daily lives. So a lot of the practice about Tai Chi is cultivating those things until we get to a point where they're much more natural to us. And we're still aware of them in the back of our mind, like when you walk along the road, you're aware of your shoes. But you don't have to think about them all the time. And what tends to happen is after a while, we realize that they're not there. We realize when we lose the route or whatever. And that can be quite frustrating, but it also shows that we probably had it beforehand. So when we look at these things in the particularly in the start of the class, these are the things that we're really practicing Tai Chi for, I think. And a movement like a dragonfly skimming the water that we just did standing actually is in a way something that encourages us to be able to maintain those qualities whilst we're occupied with something else. We want to be able to feel rooted when we're washing up, when we're doing the vacuuming, when we're talking to somebody down the road, and so on and so forth. We don't want to have to keep thinking about them. So again, they kind of underpin, they underlie everything that we actually do. And to emphasize in particular that sense of the stillness, let your hands drop down. Our usual closing exercise, embrace tiger, return to the mountain, feeling your hips sink into the chair, your shoulders drop towards your hips. All of that, just bringing your hands down, bringing your attention to your center, down into the ground, and then starting the whole cycle over again. One more time. And then. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for coming, and as always, do feel free to contact me, any questions or comments. Bye-bye for now.